course, you remember the cell phone debate of 2016. And here we are on Zoom, of all things.
Oh, yeah, good times.
It wouldn't be all right if I didn't have 3 devices in front of me to manage this meeting.
Yeah. All right.
We're live, folks.
All right, thank you. All right, thanks everybody for joining us for the June 29th regular council meeting for the city of Courtenay. I'd like to acknowledge that we are streaming on the traditional and unceded territories of the Comox First Nation. And I'm just going to talk about a little preamble here. Due to the COVID coronavirus emergency, the city of Courtenay, with the authority under Ministerial Order number M192, Local Government Meetings and Bylaw Process, Order number 3 has implemented changes to its open council meetings. In the interest of public health and safety, in-person attendance by members of the public at city meetings will be prohibited until further notice. Council meetings will be presided over by the mayor or acting mayor with electronic participation by council and staff. Meetings are available for viewing via live web streaming or video recording on the City of Courtenay website, and will start at 4 p.m. during this period. With that, if we could have the adoption of minutes.
Move adoption.
Second.
Are there any questions or comments about the minutes? Seeing none, as long as nobody is in opposition, I'll assume that minutes are received unanimously, and we can move on to staff reports and the
Mr. Mayor, I'll move that based on the June 29th, 2020 staff report, COVID-19 recovery plan policy, lifting of cultural facility closures, Council adopt option 1 as follows: that per orders and requirements of the provincial and federal authorities to maintain physical distancing and restrict public gatherings related to the spread of the coronavirus COVID-19, and as imposed by extraordinary powers adopted March 18th, 2020 under the BC Provincial State of Emergency. And whereas the Provincial Restart Plan COVID-19 has entered phase 2, which under enhanced protocols allows the return to provision of certain services, therefore be it resolved that effective immediately, Council authorizes the non-concurrent reopening of the Centre for the Arts, Comox Valley Art Gallery, Courtenay and District Museum and Paleontology Centre, and the Sid Williams Theatre, subject to the following conditions. 1, no changes to the phased industry-specific reopenings permitted under the existing province of BC Restart Plan. 2, city staff receipt from each cultural facility's respective COVID-19 safety plans. 3, that the tenants and cultural service operators comply with all applicable orders and guidelines, and that the City of Courtenay lifting of cultural facility closure policy during the COVID-19 pandemic be effective immediately and may be subject to change, A, as directed under the authority of the provincial or federal governments through the Emergency Program Act or Emergencies Act Canada, B, until such time as the provincial state of emergency for the COVID-19 pandemic has been rescinded and local governments may resume regular operations, or C, by resolution of council.
I'll second that.
Okay, are there any questions or comments regarding that? Does staff want to speak to it, I guess, maybe first?
Mayor, I will in turn pass this over to Mr. Snyder to summarize the report and take any questions that council may have. Dave?
Thank you. Through the acting CAO to Mayor and Council. I think the report speaks for itself for the most part. This is a policy decision of Council to reopen those facilities. We did use specific wording to say lifting of closure as opposed to reopening, in that we want to be careful to not mislead the public that as of tomorrow they can rush to the facility and take in services, but rather we're lifting the closure so that they can then in their own time open their facilities in a way that is a slow turn of the dial rather than necessarily a switch that is flipped. So this applies to the museum, the art gallery, and the Sid Williams Theatre. If approved, each one will set out a plan for how they reopen. I just want to point out to council that the Sid Williams Theatre is somewhat unique in this scenario, in that it is a place that people come to gather in larger numbers. And the Sid Williams Theatre, of course, being a great partner of the city and a good corporate group, is very aware of that. And so their first stages of reopening will be for rehearsal, for instruction of staff and of volunteers. They have a huge volunteer group that they work with, so they need to cycle through those volunteers to train them on COVID procedures. And then they're also working on some means of doing live streaming and the ways to use the performance venue for non-large gathering approaches. So they are looking for an opening right away as well. The museum would seek to open to limited use on July 2nd, the gallery and the Sid on July 6th. So I think we can say on behalf of the organizations that they're looking forward to seeing some of their patrons again in person. I'll take any questions.
Councillor Cole-Hamilton.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to ask a couple of questions about the reopening plans. I was particularly the one for the Arts Center. They were outlined very clearly the steps they're going to be taking, but it seems that those steps are in process right now. And one of the steps they're planning to take was a staff safety plan. And I was wondering if there isn't presently a staff safety plan. I was just wondering how the facility is being operated currently for staff when they're using it.
Thank you to the acting CAO. That's an excellent question. Some of these submissions that are included in the staff report were included about 10 days ago. 10 days ago is a lifetime in this process. So they definitely do have a staff safety plan. And for each of these organizations, and I can speak from experience, these are evolving plans. As the guidelines come out, each organization has set in place the plans that are appropriate to the information that they have at the time. And then as additional guidance has come out, they've thickened up their plan, beefed it up to include the latest guidance. I would say for the most part, most of the guidance is now out, and but we would anticipate that that we have seen their safety plan in a draft form, and in advance of their opening, they'll be providing us a final safety plan.
Great, thank you very much. Mayor, is it okay to ask a follow-up?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, okay, thanks very much. I was noticing that the Sid Williams made reference to running their safety plan by their insurer, which struck me as a really great step. But I didn't see that reference in either of the other plans. Is that something which the art gallery and the museum had the opportunity to do? And is that kind of an expected step of the due diligence for a safety plan?
That's an excellent question. I hadn't heard it mentioned from the others. I think, actually, I believe they're probably watching this right now as well. And if I know them well, and they may have already done that. In fact, I'll probably get a text from one of them here in 2 seconds as they watch this video. But I expect that they have done the same or can do the same as well. The Sid Williams Theatre is unique in this scenario, and so we recognize that. And I think they, being a very prudent organization, they take these sort of steps to make sure that they're being diligent.
Great. Thank you. I just one short final question, which was just for the second floor of the art gallery. It said that there's a common area plan that was being developed, and I believe, according to the lease, it was Ceded being the dominant tenant there who had the authority to that. I'm assuming that's also being completed since that document arrived. Just wanted to confirm that.
Yeah, it's an excellent question. In fact, between then and now, Ceded has offered their that they're going to vacate that space. And so they won't be developing that plan. We'll work with the existing partners in the building to develop that safety plan now in the absence of seabeds.
Okay, interesting. Okay, thanks very much, Mr. Schneider.
Excellent. And Councillor Theos.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for the questions and answers that have been received so far. And I wanted to ask through to Mr. Schneider, in regards to the plans that are going to be developed, would you believe that there's going to be a coordination of communication between the organizations? So there will be some level of consistency and people won't be going into the art gallery or the museum and finding it vastly different. Is that part of the criteria, Mr. Schneider?
It's a good question. Yeah, we are very coordinated. We meet with the groups once a week. But we haven't made any specific direction to them to coordinate their safety plans. In that each organization is a little different. I would say the two that are most alike are the museum and the art gallery. They're places where you go in and view exhibits. And so they have been talking a lot. But being that they're each quite autonomous, we haven't asked them to coordinate their provisions that way. Also, I would say that their signage would be branded to their unique organization, whereas with City, for instance, we'll brand all of our signage to have some commonality. But it's an interesting point, and we'll discuss that likely with them this Thursday, based on your comment today. But we haven't instructed them to coordinate themselves that way.
Thank you, Director Schneider.
All right, no further questions or comments. Seeing none, I'll pull council on their vote for the motion on the table, and we'll start with Councillor Cole-Hamilton.
In favor?
And Councillor Frisch.
In favor.
Councillor Alien.
In favor?
Councillor McCullum.
In favor.
Councillor Morin.
In favor.
Councillor Theos.
I'm in favor.
And I'm in favor as well. Excellent. All right, and next we got the staff report on summer programs.
Great. I think I'm making this motion on the recommendation. Is that correct, Mayor?
That's correct.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's a nice long one. So I'll move that based on the June 29th, 2020 staff report, COVID-19 recovery plan policy summer programs, Council approve option 1 as follows. That per orders and requirements of the provincial and federal authorities to maintain physical distancing and restrict public gatherings related to the spread of the coronavirus COVID-19 and as imposed by extraordinary powers adopted March 18th, 2020 under the BC Provincial State of Emergency, and whereas the Provincial BC Restart Plan COVID-19 has entered phase 2, which under enhanced protocols allows the return to provision of certain services including summer recreational programs. Therefore, be it resolved that effective immediately, Council authorizes the city staff to offer summer recreational programs with the following conditions. A, that in the interest of public health and safety, staff amend participant program forms to include COVID-19 language regarding provincial and federal guidelines. B, that WorkSafe BC employment safety plans for city staff engaged in the provision of these summer recreational programs has been prepared under public health aligned industry guidelines and WorkSafe BC regulations. C, that COVID-19 safety plan is completed and readily available to program participants and has been prepared under public health aligned industry guidelines, including orders issued by the public health officer, the Ministry of Public Safety and Solicitor General and WorkSafe BC regulations. D, that summer recreational programs comply with existing applicable city policies or bylaws. E, that city staff will review operations on a regular basis to ensure summer recreational programs are in compliance with the COVID-19 recovery plan policy summer programs. Do you want me to continue with the last bit?
Are you about halfway through, or?
The City of Courtenay summer recreation program policy during the COVID-19 pandemic be effective immediately, may be subject to change. A, is directed under the authority of the provincial or federal governments through the Emergency Program Act or Emergencies Act Canada. B, until such time as the provincial state of emergency for the COVID-19 pandemic has been rescinded and local governments may resume regular operations. Or C, by resolution of council.
And I'll do much less work than that, and I'll second it. Thanks, Wendy.
Thank you, Councillor Moran. You did a fantastic job, and I'll pass it over to staff.
Thank you, Mayor. And once again, I'll pass this over to Mr. Snyder to summarize the report and take any questions that council may have.
Thank you, through the acting CAO to Mayor and Council. So as you see, and as we heard, this is a policy a resolution again for the lifting of that closure. Staff have been working very hard to develop robust safety plans for our summer activities. We have a number of activities in mind. The first ones are summer camps for kids, as well as adapted camps for kids with special needs. The program offerings are reduced. Generally, we are a 10-to-1 participant to worker ratio. We're 8-to-1 this year to have a little higher level of service, but a reduced number of camps as well, so that it's manageable and we don't have too much congregating. The camps will be predominantly outdoors. Some of the adapted camps will be indoors as well, depending on the needs of the camp. They'll also be using the Salish and Solom buildings as support facilities for the camps as well, places to store gear or for kids to go to the washroom. And staff will incorporate outdoor summer programs, other outdoor summer programs like boot camps or fitness programs through the summer as they're ready to move forward with them and as the safety planning is ready. So I'll be happy to take questions, but I also have Kathy Collins here, who is the Manager of Recreation Programming, who might be able to answer some of our more detailed questions.
Excellent. All right. First we have Councillor Cole Hamilton.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And thanks, Director Snyder. This is a really well-prepared report. It gave me a very clear sense of where we're heading with these programs. And insurance seems to be a bit of a theme for me today, but I noticed that you said in the memo that the municipal and MIA BC, that you'd consulted them and were using some of their language for waivers and informed consent forms. And I just think that seems like a really, really wise use of best practices there. So anyway, very happy to support this. Thanks for the work there.
All right, and Councillor Moran.
Great, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, this is, I guess, more of a question on some specifics, but I know with our outdoor pool closure, many of our summer programs have taken advantage of the outdoor pool, and I just wondered if there was any alternative plan so that some water fun can be included in those summer programs, whether that's utilizing some of our lifeguards for another location, outdoor location, or something like that, if that's been considered or is going to happen. Thank you.
Right, well, thanks for that question. One point of clarity that I'll just offer before I pass this over to Kathy. With our outdoor pool, we actually don't hire staff until we know that the pool is opening. So there aren't any lifeguards that are currently employed by the city. And so, yeah, there isn't a clear and direct relationship that way. But I'll pass over to Kathy on what some of the offerings are. Maybe perhaps, Kathy, if you could give council a bit of an overview of the type of programming, as well as whether there's any aquatic components.
Through the mayor, through the acting CAO to the mayor and council, many considerations have been obviously adapted and taken into account in how we're going to offer the same level of fun to our participants this summer. So unfortunately, you're right, Councillor Moran, we don't have the use of our lovely outdoor pool. However, we have some amazingly creative and fun summer staff on hand who have really stepped up to the challenge in looking at what kind of fun things can we do out in our parks with water play and use, which I'm hoping all the rain is gone now for the month of June. So it's going to be the hot days this July and August. So you can probably see things like some wacky water races and water balloon fights and Many precautions have been taken into consideration with ensuring that each participant has their own set of supplies and equipment and things so that they're not sharing and we're reducing touch points. But what we found is there's actually quite a few options with water play this summer. So it's definitely a bit of a challenge, but we've got some really good staff on hand, and we were fortunate this year to have a lot of returning staff. So they've kind of already got the groundworks of what a normal summer camp would look like. So it's good for them. They're being tested and they're doing well and rising to the challenge and coming up with some very creative things.
Great, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And Councillor McCollum.
Thanks, Mayor, and thank you to city staff. Oh,
I just noticed Trevor had his hand up as well, so I don't know if he wanted to add in a little bit.
Maybe I'll just jump in quickly. I just want to make some clarifying points around the pool and the water park. They're two separate entities. So the water park council is going to see a briefing note in the coming days about the opening up of the water park, the splash park, in alignment with Comox. So hopefully that helps as well.
Thanks. Back to you, Councillor McCollum.
thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to say a big thank you to city staff for this report. I think it's really good news to see that we're going to have summer day camp programming available. It's something that many families rely on in our community, and I think there's been probably a lot of stress and concern for parents in the last couple of months about what the summer is going to look like after this restart plan has started and now school's out. So I think it's great news that we are adapting and getting some programming in place. I do realize that it is going to be a more reduced offering, and I'm just wondering if staff can comment on what the reduction is versus a typical year, and if there's any capacity for adjusting if we have, like, if we're overwhelmed with a lot of registrations, and if any thought's been given to that component also.
Yeah, thanks for that question. I will turn this over to Kathy, just a little bit of advanced warning for Kathy on some of the comparison between this year and prior years so that we get a sense of that. But I'll give some context that this policy statement that Council's considering now will give us the option to consider the scale and the pace of this sort of programming. The analogy that we use is that this is a dial and not a switch. And so we are looking to dial this up as appropriate. And I think it's a really good approach to get staff in, get their feet wet, so to speak, and get used to what social distance programming feels like. And then we dial it up as we can. But I'll pass over to Kathy to talk about some of the comparisons.
Through the acting CEO to mayor and council. So as Dave said, it's definitely a slow turning of the dial. One thing that everyone may have noticed right off the bat is we did not publish a printed guide this year. And the whole point of that with our partner municipalities was so that we could have the flexibility to adjust and adapt to what the needs and demands are in the community. We recognize that we're dealing with anything but a typical summer. And many people's anxieties, both on a children's level and parents, are heightened because they don't know what's going to transpire, what things are looking like. So in a typical summer, we'd have about 200 participants a week in our camps. But what we're starting with right off the bat is we're looking at about 34 spaces just with our popular part-time and discovery camps. And then we have our adapted program, which is a partnership with MCFD that's only available to clients of MCFD, which would be one-on-one support for them to join those camps. So far we're seeing the response is quite well received. We've hired the same complement of summer staff that we normally would. So it gives us the flexibility to adjust and adapt and add on things as we need to. So if the demand's there and we're seeing numbers increase, we could explore what that looks like then in terms of adding on more to ensure that people's needs for the summer are being met, especially those working parents.
Great. It's great to hear. Thank you.
Excellent. And Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. And so along those same lines, are you looking at providing the same amount of same number of programs, or I guess it depends on how many people sign up.
Yeah, thanks for that question. Well, we have only offered a limited number of spaces, so we are definitely not offering the same number that we normally do. The spaces can only fill that we offer. So yeah, over time though, we would like to dial this up, but I would expect that this year we will be still substantially fewer than we normally would have. Another component that I'll just mention, when Kathy commented that we have a similar number of staff, COVID does require additional staff for things like what we're referring to as ambassadors, that when the parents drive up and they're trying to figure out where to drop their kid off, that an ambassador would be able to greet them and to say, you're with this age, go this way, and you go this way. So there's no crowding, no confusion, and a smoother transition of the parental drop-off as well.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, I do really appreciate the hard work, and I know it's challenging, so that's great. Do you have an idea of what sort of percentage we're at? Are we doing half as many, and I guess there are half as many spots sometimes, or less spots in some of the camps as well as having less camps?
Yeah, I'll just see Kathy to comment or nod, but I believe she had commented we're normally about 200 spaces and we're about 35 this year. So a substantial reduction.
Yeah, okay, thanks for that.
All right, my quick math says that that's about a sixth or so, somewhere in there. And I don't see any further questions or comments. So thanks again for the report, just getting us up to date. Really appreciate it. Thanks to Councillor Morin for reading the lengthy motion. And on that, we'll go to Council for their vote, starting with Councillor Cole-Hamilton.
In favor.
Councillor Frisch.
In favor.
Councillor Hillian.
In favor.
Councillor McCollum.
In favor.
Councillor Morin.
In favor.
Councillor Theos.
I'm in favor.
And I'm in favor as well. Thanks very much. And moving along, we have development services for the liquor license.
Yep, thanks, Mayor. I'll move this if that's okay. I'll move that based on today's staff report, that Council approve option 1 as follows. The Council of the City of Courtenay recommends the Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch approve the application for Crown Isle Golf Club's permanent change to a liquor license. And Council's comments on the prescribed consideration are as follows. If the amendment application is approved, it would not result in an increase of noise in the area. If it's approved, it would not negatively impact the community based on the submissions received from the public. And in order to gather the views of residents, the City of Courtenay posted a notice on the website outlining the application. Additionally, the RCMP was contacted for comment and indicated having no concerns.
Second that.
All right, thanks. And I'll pass it over to staff.
I will in turn pass this to Matt Fitzgerald, who can summarize the report and take any questions that council may have.
Thank you. Through the acting CAO to Mayor and Council. So this proposal is to permanently change the hours of operation for an established liquor license. The proposed change would allow the pub to open at 9 a.m. Instead of the current 11 a.m. Notice of the proposal was posted on the city's website from June 2nd to the 15th, and no comments were received during that period. Staff are recommending the council recommends to the LCRB that the liquor license change is approved. And I'll take any questions.
All right. I don't see anybody raising their hands just yet. So based on that, I will thank staff for the report. And I think we're ready to get their vote, starting with Councillor Cole-Hamilton.
In favor.
Councillor Frisch.
Yep, in favor.
Councillor Hillian.
In favor.
Councillor McCollum.
In favor.
Councillor Morin.
In favor.
Councillor Theos.
Yes, I'm in favor.
And I'm in favor as well. All
Excuse me.
right. And next we have the zoning amendment for a secondary suite.
I think that's me. I'll move that based on today's staff report, zoning amendment bylaw number 2998 to allow for a secondary suite at 2466 Walbrand Place. Council approve option 1 and proceed to first and second readings of zoning amendment bylaw number 2998 2020 and that council directs staff to schedule and advertise a statutory public hearing with respect to the above referenced bylaw following the resumption of regular council meetings or when an alternative process is developed.
Seconded for discussion purposes. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Councillor Hillian and Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor, and thanks for the report. Obviously this has some opposition in the neighborhood, and not terribly surprised. It's not the first secondary suite that we've seen this from. Some of the concerns do have a solution, and that was offered in option 2, and that option was to have a covenant placed on the rezoning to only allow the secondary suite to be rented out if the main house was occupied by the owners. And I was just wondering if staff might be able to comment on some of the positive and negative aspects of such a covenant.
Sure. So through the acting CAO to Mayor and Council. So I mean, as you described, the owner of the house would have to live in the main unit, and then the secondary suite could be rented out. So the positive elements there is that the owner would be on site to oversee the renter. That might be one benefit. Other than that, I think it's basically the same situation, whether both units are rented or if one unit is rented and one is occupied by the owner.
Right, and I presume the assumption is that the renter would have similar standards to the owner and thus maintain the culture of the neighborhood, so to speak, which I can relate to, and I do think it's probably a fair policy to have. Maybe even citywide. I know Comox has that similar policy. I'm also just wondering if there are any unintended consequences that staff can think about for any reason why we wouldn't go ahead and suggest option 2. And also, do we have any idea how the owners of the property feel about that option?
So through the acting CAO to Mayor and Council, so unintended consequences, I guess, would be that the owner would have to live on the property. They couldn't rent out both elements of the property. So that might be one downside for the owner. As for what the owner thinks of the housing agreement being required as a condition of the of zoning approval, I haven't personally had that conversation with them, but that's the direction of council. Then we can have that conversation and make that a requirement.
Sure. So, based on that, I'm going to move that we amend the resolution to include that council directs staff to prepare and execute a housing agreement bylaw at the applicant's expense that requires the owner of the land to occupy one of the dwelling units on the land as a condition of adoption of zoning bylaw number 2993/2020.
I'll second that.
Okay, I do notice that there are hands up waiting to chat, but now that we have an amendment on the table, if you want to speak to that amendment, I'll start with Councillor Cole-Hamilton, or would you rather wait for the results of the amendment?
I also favor the amendment, so I'd be happy to speak on that if that's a good time. Okay, thank you, Mayor. I noticed a number of concerns were brought up, and I thought that I also found it interesting that many of the letters refer to the fact that there are a lot of informal basement suites already in the neighborhood, that many people have family already living downstairs but haven't formalized it through zoning. So it would seem a lot of the concerns that people raise, like traffic and parking, would already be factors because of the informal occupancy of downstairs suites. And in fact, parking would actually be improved by having a formal zoning amendment rather than just people choosing to have another family live in their basement. So it seems to me that the rezoning would assist in many ways in terms of things like parking, and it would also assist in some of the other concerns that were expressed, as Councillor Frisch said, concerns that the house perhaps might not be maintained if both suites were rented out. So I see that with a covenant, which requires the owner live there, that the concerns over the state of the building and the upkeep by tenants, I think, are addressed. And some of the other concerns like parking are addressed even more clearly than they would be if, I mean, there is already someone living in the basement, a young woman who's a student at Nick, already living there. The increase of traffic and parking won't change with it becoming a formal suite. They'll just become more regulated, and parking space will have to be provided. So I think that the zoning amendment, as suggested with the covenant, addresses almost all of the concerns that we've seen addressed here. So I'm fully in favor. Thank you.
All right, thanks. And Acting CAO, Mr. Kushner, did you want to add to the conversation?
Mr. Mayor, I just thought it might be appropriate for Ian Buck to weigh in with his perspective on the amendment if you have anything.
Yeah, thanks very much. Through Acting CEO to Mayor and Council, I don't have any specific opposition to it. We did include it based on the comments from the neighborhood. To answer a few of the questions, I guess, administratively, it does add a little bit extra burden to enforce, but it does give us a solid grounding if there is an issue to go through an enforcement process. There often would be a cost associated with enforcing a covenant like that if the owner wasn't compliant on the first requests that the city makes. And then one of the other potential issues, and I know Comox has it built right into their zoning, and we've looked at that before. And we're more than happy to bring forward another report in the future if that's the direction of council. But I have heard from sort of real estate investment and transaction perspective that having a condition like that can make it difficult for resale of a property or sale where somebody is buying it for investment purposes. I think those issues are easily overcome, and I think approaching it the way we are here with the housing agreement works well in this case. But happy to take any questions about that if council has any.
Okay. And Councillor Healing, did you want to speak to the amendment?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Thanks very much. I support the amendment. I think that this is a neighborhood that is starting to see significant change given the number of multifamily dwellings that are going to be built in the form of apartments. We did hear from a lot of these same people who live on Walbran when we had the zoning application for the Mission and Lerwick property, and we heard about the traffic concerns along with others. So it seems to me that the people who expressed their opposition to this, but then made it conditional, saying that they would support it if it was owner occupied, I think that is the way to go. I know that some of the difficulties that Mr. Buck referred to, making it difficult to resell because it would have to be owner occupied and couldn't be used simply for investment purposes, strikes me that that's exactly what the people in the neighborhood are looking to protect. To me, it doesn't seem like a huge hardship. I was struck by the number of people who had some suspicions about motivation here, and I think it's unfortunate that there wasn't an opportunity, given the pandemic, for there actually to be a neighborhood meeting where people could have discussed them directly with the owners. But I did want to ask a question about another aspect of concern that was noted, if that's permissible. And if staff could comment on the concerns related to parking. And a couple of people referenced whether or not, given the traffic in the area with the school and sporting activities, whether or not there could be residential parking only, whether we've explored that in any parts of our city. I know other cities have that, and I'm just wondering what staff thoughts are in relation to that as a possible solution for some of our challenges here.
And Acting CEO, Mr. Kushner.
Pass this over to Mr. Buck once again get his perspective, but I do know that residential parking and initiatives like that come with an administrative burden.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, I can't hear Mr. Kushner.
Yeah, your audio got really quiet there. If you're able to speak up a little bit.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Much better.
Okay. Yeah, I was just going to say, I'll certainly pass this over to Mr. Buck for his perspective once again, but there is quite a heavy administrative burden sometimes with residential parking and enforcement of that type, but I'll certainly pass it over to Mr. Buck.
Yeah, thanks again through the acting CEO to Mayor and Council. We did explore this, not in great detail, but during the hospital construction and the follow-up there. And as I recall at that time, the administrative burden was something that was questioned. And we also looked to the town of Comox and the parking that they had around St. Joseph's Hospital. And from advice we got from their planner through their bylaw enforcement department, they didn't really see a big issue in that area. But it is something, as Councillor Hillian notes, it's commonly used really around hospitals and other municipalities. But it is something, as the acting CEO said, that especially with our limited bylaw enforcement department, that would add to the burden of enforcement should it become an issue.
Thanks very much.
Okay, and Councillor Morin, did you want to speak to the amendment as well?
Sure, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, just kind of repeating some of Councillor Hillian's points that this neighborhood is faced with some changes that they, didn't anticipate in the beginning when they moved in. But I think that I really do have empathy for people who, in both situations, who have their neighborhoods changing a bit, but also trying to find places to rent. And I know many of us have young adults living in our homes, or with COVID coming back to the nest, as it were. I think that some of the comments that were made about that there's plenty of rental housing is unfortunately not accurate, that it's very difficult to find places. And if you're a student or, with almost any level of income, it's difficult to find affordable rentals, as we know. And so I think that it's a good solution to go with this option. I know that we do have some other regulations forthcoming, hopefully around vacation rentals, etc., which also may help this kind of concern in the neighborhood. But I think it's a good compromise, and hopefully, some of these changes to the neighborhood will be mitigated a little bit with that kind of an agreement in place. Thank you.
All right, I don't see any further questions or comments. So just polling council on the amendment to the motion, starting with Councillor Cole Hamilton.
In favor.
Councillor Frisch.
In favor.
Councillor Hillian.
In favor.
Councillor McCullum.
In favor.
Councillor Morin.
In favor.
Councillor Theos.
Vote in favor.
And I'm in favor as well. So excellent, thanks. So back to the main motion as amended. Were there any further questions or comments regarding the main motion as amended? And I don't see, Councillor Hillian.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to respond to a number of people who talked about why they bought in the particular area, that they chose a neighborhood with single family and wanted it to stay that way. I know that it's difficult when circumstances change, and I've personally lived in a neighborhood where a duplex was built across the street, taking out my view of the glacier. But the reality is that things do change, and there is a mechanism for zoning to change and for official community plans to change. And I'm just wondering if our staff could comment on whether we're starting to hear anything from people in the official community plan process that might see a move towards a blanket zoning for the entire city, which has been discussed in the past, that would take out these types of one-off situations for neighborhoods.
Thanks for the question. Offhand, I don't know specifics of the responses we've got. The next item up on the agenda actually deals with stakeholder engagement. I would expect, and I think staff would respond positively to, blanket rezoning for secondary suites, infill type housing, not only to make it easier for potential applicants to go through the process, but also easing a bit of the burden on staff in processing these, as well as giving some, through that process, giving some certainty and, you know, maybe it's not the certainty a neighborhood would look for, but flexibility and certainty for homeowners and what they can and can't do with their property. We are seeing an increased number of requests for infill housing. And I think to Councillor Morin's point, we do see a lot of new rental housing coming on the market, but it's not always affordable for people. So especially when you're looking at family situations such as this applicant is, having an option at home, whether it's a secondary suite or a you know, tiny house or secondary residence in the property, I think provides good flexibility for families and the returning empty nesters or returning students to the home, or as we have now, and I sort of have in my house as well, a COVID come home to stay safe. So I think it is something that we will see through the process, as well as other ideas around infill and lot sizes and such.
Thanks. And if I could just comment further, Mr. Mayor, I think we need to ask ourselves a question as citizens, whether the circumstances that we buy in are going to stay that way forever. The reality is that we age, we get to the point where we want to move on, perhaps downsize. And it's not a given that there are always going to be new people who can afford to move into the same house in the same neighborhood and keep it the same way. And we've heard of the experience in other centers where as a neighborhood ages, younger people coming along can't afford to buy the houses in that neighborhood. And so options have to be considered. So I think it's something that is difficult given the peace and quiet that people want from the characteristics of their neighborhood. But I do believe as time goes by, it's something that we need to be aware of and to consider. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Theos.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just unmuting myself. No, I know that that discussion about blanket rezoning for secondary suites has come up quite a bit amongst the public that I've spoken with. And when I did go door to door, it was a topic of interest. And since then, I have had people coming up to me and asking me if that was a direction we were considering. I really believe that there is some appetite for that, but the only consideration I would have is that there may be certain areas where, and again, that's where the communication and the engagement would come, would be able to be able to clarify that. But whether it's Old Orchard or Crown Isle or some other area where it may not fit, and you know, according to the larger block of citizens that are there, so that would be a discussion. I think that yes, possibly a blanket zoning like Comox has or other communities, but you know, with the consideration of certain pockets where it just might not work.
Okay. All right. Now I don't see any further questions or comments, so I'm going to go back to polling council on the motion as amended, and starting with Councillor Cole Hamilton.
In favor.
Councillor Frisch.
In favor.
Councillor Hillian.
In favor.
Councillor McCollum.
In favor.
Councillor Morin.
In favor.
Councillor Theos.
I'm in favor.
And I'm in favor as well. All right, thanks very much. Next, we have for receipt the OCP stakeholder consultation.
I will move the OCP stakeholder consultation be received.
Second.
Excellent. And Mr. Kushner, acting CAO.
All right, well, I'll pass this over to Mr. Buck to summarize the briefing note and take any questions that council may have.
Thanks again through the acting CAO to Mayor and Council. This is just really an update for Council to let you know where we're at with the process and what's coming up over the course of the summer. We've just started in the past week to send out letters to a whole wide range of stakeholder groups. I think we're probably in the neighborhood of 25 to 30 at least that we're sending it to. Trying to cast a broad net, and the idea will be that with the first phase of consultation with stakeholders will be online, so more of a brainstorming session on different topic areas. From that feedback and feedback we had from the ideas fair, we'll refine down ideas and then get into more workshop style events. And this of course is all COVID dependent, and we're working on different ways to make that work, both in person and ideally in a situation where it's in person and online combined, but still working through that, and we'll provide updates to council in the future on how that will work. What we want to see there, or are hoping to see anyways, is to have up to 2 councillors attend each of the workshop sessions. We'd like you to not only be there to listen at the table, but also maybe provide input from your perspectives and really get your hands on to the OCP process. We'll provide that detail as it unfolds. I expect that will be probably in the August-September timeframe, but we may have a bit of overlap with both the stakeholder online engagement and some of these workshops, just depending on timing. Following that, we will take all of that feedback as we start into policy development, and then again cast the net more broadly to the stakeholder groups to receive input on the policy that's being developed before it gets into formal draft form. And then of course, once we do have the draft OCP policies, those will again go out not only to the community, but more broadly. On the public side, in the near future here, I guess mid-July, we're aiming for is sending out the public engagement on the growth scenarios. And what that is, I've mentioned it briefly before, but we have 2 different scenarios that have been modeled of where growth nodes could be. The modeling will look at the energy and greenhouse emissions from those nodes in order to inform the reductions that we need in our greenhouse gases to meet our net zero target. Those sessions will happen, like I say, very shortly, but before they do go out, we'll provide council with copies of the survey and with copies of the growth scenarios. So if you're asked on the street or I guess not too many events now, but while you're out and about, you'll have some information to rely on. And I think that's all I'll say for now, and happy to take any questions on that.
All right, and starting with Councillor Morin.
Great, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Buck, for the report. Thrilled that that things are going to start picking up again in terms of this review. I just wanted to say that, of course, many of us have been having a lot of Zoom meetings, and some are better facilitated than others, but the ones that have been facilitated well, there's been a few, Councillor Cole-Hamilton's been involved in a couple of them, I know, that were really well facilitated, where you know, the breakout rooms were being used, and you know, all the sort of technology or tools were used really well, and I think created some really meaningful dialogue with the participants, and you know, involving Google Documents as well. So I think for those folks who do have some comfort level with online, if things are facilitated well, I think that the online method can have a lot of meaningful information come out of it. So I think that although we obviously want to have some face-to-face, you know, small gatherings or whatever we can do, maybe not to rule out the I guess the richness of the information that we may get from an online format if it's done well. Thanks.
All right, thanks. And was there anyone else with any questions or comments? Seeing none, again, this is just for receipt. And so I will assume that it is received unanimously unless somebody waves their hands furiously to let me know they're in opposition. All right, thanks very much, staff, for for that. And next on the agenda is our updates from council members. And so this will be the first time we've done this in quite some time, I think. So if you don't have anything, you can just pass, but I'll just go through the list, starting with Councillor Cole Hamilton.
And nothing particular. Knowing we have a long meeting, I'll just I'll save that for the email to Wendy. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks. I'll pass.
All right, Councillor Hillian.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to let the rest of council and staff know that I had the opportunity to accompany the mayor to a meeting with the casino management earlier last week. And the opportunity was to hear about their hopes for reopening sometime during the summer. Apparently, the casino was originally seen as one of the last businesses that would be allowed under provincial health regulations to open, but we were advised that they've been quite vigorous in developing a safety plan, and the structure of their facility actually lends itself to that, and they're optimistic that they will get the approval to go ahead. Despite that, it was indicated that, as people would expect, we'll be receiving significantly less in the annual funding that we are fortunate enough to gain from the casino being in our community. And at this point, the prediction is that it'll be in the 30% range. So that obviously has very significant ramifications for our budgetary considerations for next year. I thought that council would be interested to hear about that. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Councillor Hillian, and thanks for attending that meeting with me. I appreciate it. I think one of the things that as Councillor Hillian was alluding to, just by the fact that people use cards, and so that contact tracing is actually built into their system to know who's been at what machines and at what casinos. So it certainly seems like they are really pushing forward on making sure that they're able to track any of the movements of folks. Councillor McCullum.
I don't have anything I need to report. I'll pass, thanks.
Okay, Councillor Morin.
Great, thank you, Mayor. Just a couple things. I just wanted to let council know who are not on the regional district that the Food Policy Council did bring forward some resolutions for UBCM around advocating for farmers markets to be designated essential services, as well as to be part of emergency response in future. So for those attending UBCM, just to kind of keep an eye out for those, hopefully to support them. And then I just wanted to do a little bit of a shout out to the business community. I know the Downtown Business Association had their AGM and the Chamber just had their AGM. I was able to attend the Downtown Courtney AGM, but not the Chamber. But I did send a message to the Chamber members, just thanking them for their flexibility with all the impacts of COVID, and also for the many businesses that have come forward to support our really vulnerable folks, even though they haven't been able to maybe open their businesses, particularly around food security. I just wanted to acknowledge that that local businesses have really stepped up and that they're appreciated. And then the last thing would just be that, and I'll let Councillor Cole Hamilton, well, I guess he's already gone, but we did participate in in 3 sessions with the Canadian Drug Policy Coalition folks as part of the drug strategy or drug policy conversations that hopefully will lead to some local policy to help mitigate some of the impacts of substance misuse in the community. So those were very well facilitated, and I'm excited that we were able to do those even though they weren't in person. Thanks so much.
All right, thanks, Councillor Morin. Councillor Theos.
Thank you for the opportunity. And I just wanted to, as the representative of the City of Courtenay for the Library Board, I just wanted to provide an update on the Library Board's direction moving forward and what their plan is. The library update can be found on the VIRL website, Vancouver Island Regional Library website. And I would just say, if anybody's listening or watching the streaming that and is interested in when and how the libraries will reopen, that is the site to go to, and you'll get a comprehensive and in-depth, a pretty clear direction of what the library is planning on doing. But the library for the city of Courtenay will be having a soft opening tomorrow. And as was mentioned earlier by Councillor McCollum, that was wisely mentioned, is that their hours are limited, but hopefully that the hours will expand in moving forward in the near future. And what the library is trying to do is follow the same type of guidelines that we are just hearing throughout the day and throughout this meeting this evening, which are following the WorkSafe BC guidelines and protocols, following the recovery plan that they put out that has to meet the safety needs for the visiting public. And as we're hearing today with many of our facilities, they are at a stage where we want to be moving the plans forward in a strategic and in an intelligent, safe way, not to rush it and then have to take another step backwards if we missed a few steps or if it's done improperly. So I believe that that the library is acting extremely prudently, and the board is working very hard to reopen the libraries for the many people that are using the service. So I will leave it at that. And thank you very much.
All right, thanks very much, Councillor Theos. And Councillor Hillian did talk about the casino, which is certainly, seemed like a positive meeting, that they have a plan that is, again, I think the name of the game right now is, slow and steady, staying safe. A couple other things that have happened in the recent history. I was elected chair of the local ICE, the Island Coastal Economic Trust Regional Advisory Committee, and which meets a few times a year, really to disperse funds. It was originally created back around 2008, 2009 to deal with the economic collapse back then, and is sort of strategically placed right now to really help with the economy as we come out of this pandemic. And also very proud to be co-chair with Chief Nicole Rempel of Comox First Nation of the Comox Valley Economic Recovery Task Force. And so we've had a few meetings there. We're getting down to making some announcements and taking some actions already. And so just a couple things that are happening in our community. So with that, I think we can move on to resolutions of council.
Mayor, I'd like to move the in-camera motion. So I'll move that a special in-camera meeting closed to the public will be held June 29th, 2020 at the conclusion of the regular council meeting pursuant to the following subsections of the community charter: 90 sub 1 sub C, labor relations or other employee relations; 90 sub 1 sub D, the security of the property of the municipality; 90 sub 1 sub E, the acquisition, disposition, or expropriation of land or improvements if the council considers that disclosure could reasonably be expected to harm the interests of the municipality; 90 sub 1 sub G, litigation or potential litigation affecting the municipality; and 90 sub 1 sub I, the receipt of advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose.
Second that.
Excellent. Is there any questions or comments regarding the motion? Seeing none, I'll poll council. Councillor Cole Hamilton.
In favor?
Councillor Frisch.
In favor.
Councillor Hillian.
In favor.
Councillor McCollum.
In favor.
Councillor Morin.
In favor.
Councillor Theos.
I'm in favor.
And I'm in favor as well. Excellent. And then we have a notice of motion. for the Connect Warming Center. Councillor Hillian.
Thank you, Mayor. It's my understanding that the city has received a letter from the Coalition to End Homelessness. And that letter contains a request to extend the lease on the warming center. And I'm sure staff and others may want to comment on the contents of the letter, but I will move that the correspondence dated June 11th, 2020 from the Comox Valley Coalition to End Homelessness, CVCEH, requesting a one-year lease renewal of the Connect Warming Center with continued in-kind support from the City of Courtney be received for information that the terms and renewal of the Connect Warming Center license to occupy agreement between the Comox Valley Transition Society, the licensee, for use of the north side of the city-owned premises located at 685 Cliff Avenue, legal description PID 006102930, Lot 3, Section 61, Comox District Plan VIP 3817, expiring June 30th, 2020, be temporarily extended until the 31st day of August 2020, pursuant to Section 3 of the
agreement.
Of the agreement, yes. Sorry, I'm scrolling down on the chat function here. And that staff provide public notice to satisfy the statutory advertising requirements for the provision of assistance and disposition of city lands per Section 24 of the Community Charter, that the mayor and corporate officer be authorized to execute all documentation relating to the interim extended terms and renewal of the license to occupy agreement, and that staff provide a report investigating options and implications to enter into a one-year lease agreement with the CVCEH and the City of Courtney at a future council meeting on or before August 17th, 2020.
Second.
All right, thanks for that. Appreciate that, Councillor Hillian. Did you want to speak to that, Councillor Hillian, at all, or shall I go into raised hands?
Well, perhaps I'll just add, Mr. Mayor, that it's gratifying to see the letter with the indication regarding what positive use has been made of the center during the last several months. The services that it's provided, medical and otherwise, to people who are vulnerable, particularly during this period of pandemic. And I certainly hope that we can continue to work with the coalition and the Transition Society keep this going. And I do note that I've heard positive comments from the business community about the impact of the center from their perspective. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Acting CIO, Mr. Kushner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The motion on the floor should suffice to give staff enough time to come back with a staff report for budget implications and potential long-term uses for that site as well.
Excellent. And if we find that it's not enough time, I'm sure we can extend it as needed. And I'm just going to mute a couple microphones. And Councillor McCollum.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I just wanted to take the opportunity to acknowledge the great work that the Coalition to End Homelessness has done with the Warming Center, and just what an important service has been for both the community at large and also our downtown businesses and also the folks living downtown. I think it's really important that this continues. I think it would be difficult for us to go back to how it was before we had this option. I can't recall off the top of my head if this funding was coming through our operations or if it was coming out of gaming, and I'm wondering if staff knows this off the top, or if we should just wait for the staff report.
Yeah, and Mr. Mayor, I quickly answer that. It's coming through operations now.
Okay. It strikes me that this is something that the Comox Valley at large benefits from when we provide these services to people who don't have anywhere to live. And I do think that going forward, we should consider whether this is a good fit for gaming. And I realize this is probably the worst year to look at that, given that our revenues are going to be really impacted, but it might be useful to consider that. I don't know if we want to consider it in the staff report or at a later date, but just just a comment I wanted to add.
Excellent. And I think, you know, possibly in that same vein, there are many things that the city of Courtenay takes on as a burden for the entire Comox Valley. So potentially in that staff report, there may be some suggestions on whether or not we take a request to the regional district to see if this is something they would partner with in terms of funding. And again, I think, you know, we did take this on. I think it has proven itself as, again, most of the feedback that I've gotten, if not all the feedback that I've gotten, has been quite positive. And again, if this is something that is benefiting the entire Comox Valley, then that might be a place that we might want to make sure that the other local municipalities are participating and making sure that we are looking after those that are most vulnerable. Councillor Moore.
Great, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I'm not sure how the 2-month or the August date, how that was determined, but I guess I'm just wondering really if another 3 months might be better, just with you know, staffing issues. It doesn't give folks a lot of time who are connected with Connect to juggle things and allow for, you know, changes in plans. I guess I'm just wondering if it might just give us a bit more time with folks going on vacation, et cetera, to maybe extend it to the end of September instead. So maybe staff could comment on whether that would be a pro or a con, or I just think a bit more time might be prudent. Thank you.
All right, Acting CIO, Mr. Christian.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Wren. That's an excellent point. I was just going to comment that there are some pending vacations coming, and certainly we could use the extra 30 days. So thank you.
So maybe I'll propose an amendment then to change the date to the end of September 30th, please.
I'll second that.
All right.
I'd be happy to consider that a friendly amendment, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, unless I see somebody waving their hands furiously in opposition, I'm going to assume that that is a friendly amendment. Not that those exist, but we're going to go with that for today. And we won't get in trouble, I'm sure. So we'll just move on based on the new end date. And with that, Councillor Theos.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I was wondering, you know, the facility has worked what appears to be well for the services that it was providing, and it seems to be well received by the business community also. But my question is, being that it is a community building, are we receiving any kind of? I know the letter that was sent, and I read it, and did talk about the amount of people on a daily basis, 30 to 40, that are coming through, and that there are some educational and job, you know, direction for job employment services that are being provided. But is there a report that we receive maybe once every 6 months, or I know it hasn't been ongoing that long, but just to give us an indication and some clarity as to what those programs may be and how successful they are, so we can pass that on to the public in case we're asked.
Good points. Acting CIO, Mr. Kushner.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Theos. That's an excellent question. I know that Mr. Ward was in communication with them, but if a formalized sort of staff's report, you know, once every 3 or 6 months, that's something that could be worked into to an extension.
Oh, thank you very much. That'd be great.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure that they're good at their data collection, and I'm sure if Mr. Kushner or whoever's communicating with them ask them for a report that could possibly support our staff's report that's going to be coming forward, that would probably be. I think they'd be happy to provide that information. So that's my 2 cents. But yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Thank you, Mayor.
And any other questions or comments based on the motion on the table? Seeing none, we'll poll council, starting with Councillor Paul Hamilton.
In favor.
Councillor Fish.
In favor.
Councillor Hillian,
In favor?
Councillor McCollum,
In favor.
Councillor Moran,
In favor.
Councillor Theos,
I'm in favor.
and I'm in favor as well. Excellent. That's great. Now that that's done, now it's into bylaws.
I move that zoning bylaw to rezone property from residential 1B zone R1B to residential 1S zone R1S to allow for a secondary suite 2466 Walbrand Place. Pass first and second reading, please.
Second.
Excellent. Any questions or comments regarding that? Seeing none, we did have a fulsome discussion, I think. So I'll poll council, starting with Councillor Cole-Hamilton,
In favor?
Councillor Frisch,
In favor.
Councillor Hillian,
In favor?
Councillor McCullum,
In favor.
Councillor Moran,
In favor.
Councillor Theos,
I'm in favor.
and I'm in favor as well. All right. Only one thing left on the agenda.
Move
Move
adjournment.
adjournment?
Second.
Excellent. All those in favor of adjournment, raise your hands. And I think that's it. Thanks. Raising your hand so you can see it on the camera too. Appreciate that. Thanks everybody for watching the meeting today. And that's it. I think we're done.